Hello all you freedom-loving people. Welcome to another episode of Front Page. I'm your host, Scott Cameron Goulet. Despite worldwide opposition to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russia's posture is getting stronger and stronger. This is because Putin knows that the West will not send troops to help Ukraine. Now Russia has turned the tables by threatening the West that it will stop supplying energy. This war, no matter how long it lasts, will certainly affect the world's food supply and energy prices this year. And now that Biden has announced that the U.S. is banning all oil imports from Russia, Americans will really be feeling the pinch. In the United States, finally, one state has recommended not giving the COVID vaccine to children. And to wrap up today's episode, let's take a look at an astronomical spectacle in the Canadian sky. Okay, let's get into it. The third round of Russia-Ukraine talks took place in the Brest region of Belarus on March 7th. However, they did not make much progress. Top Ukrainian negotiator Mikhailo Podolyak announced that the two sides will continue intensive consultations toward a possible truce. The advisor to President Zelensky stated that there were only minor positive developments in improving the logistics of the humanitarian corridor in the third round of negotiations. He tweeted, "The third round of negotiations has ended. There are small positive subductions in improving the logistics of humanitarian corridors. Intensive consultations have continued on the basic political block of the regulations, along with a ceasefire and security guarantees." Reuters reported that Russia has told Ukraine that it is ready to halt military operations in a moment if Kiev meets a list of conditions. They are that Ukraine ceases military action and changes its constitution to preserve neutrality, and it acknowledges Crimea as Russian territory and recognizes the separatist republics of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent states. Most media outlets have claimed that the sanctions from the West have hit Russia hard, but from the tone of the Russian demands, it appears that Russia has the advantage in terms of military power, although Ukrainian resistance is very steadfast. Ukraine, on the other hand, has softened its tone ahead of the negotiations. A Ukrainian negotiator said that Ukraine is not willing to compromise on its territorial integrity, but is open to discussing non-NATO models for its future. David Arahamia, the Ukrainian chief negotiator, said, "The response that we are getting from the NATO countries is that they are not ready to even discuss having us in NATO, not for the next period of 5 or 10 years. As we have analyzed on our membership site, NATO is partly responsible for this war in Ukraine. Ukraine applied to NATO 4 years ago, and NATO has been dragging its feet while the Ukrainian people are paying for it with their lives. And now, to tell Ukraine that NATO membership is almost impossible, well, we can imagine the disappointment and anger." The Russia-Ukraine war is into its 13th day. A bipartisan group of lawmakers proposed legislation banning Russian energy imports. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters on March 7th,
"Well, no decision has been made at this point by the president about a ban on importing oil from Russia. And those discussions are ongoing internally and also with our counterparts and partners in Europe and around the world."
Russia, in turn, has threatened to cut gas to Europe. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak warned, in connection with unfounded accusations against Russia regarding the energy crisis in Europe and the imposition of a ban on Nord Stream 2, "We have every right to make a matching decision and impose an embargo on gas pumping through the Nord Stream 1 gas pipeline." On March 8th, Biden announced,
"Today, I'm announcing the United States is targeting the main artery of Russia's economy. We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine."
The ban also includes Russian coal. Biden said the decision was made in close discussions with allies and partners in Europe, but said that some allies may not be in a position to join us. Biden is also looking for alternatives. Axiom reported that Biden may travel to Saudi Arabia in the coming months to request more oil. The Wall Street Journal reported that U.S. officials met with Venezuelan officials face-to-face over the weekend to discuss possible oil exports to replace Russia. Alberta Premier Jason Kennedy of Canada expressed his confusion about these Washington decisions. He said the United States should be seeking his province's oil instead of getting it from Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. He tweeted, "Alberta would be delighted to welcome such a visit from President Joe Biden. We could discuss how to ship nearly 1 million barrels a day of responsibly produced energy every day from the U.S.'s closest friend and ally. All it would take is Biden's approval for Keystone XL. Easy." Kenney also questioned the administration's rationale. He asked, what is going on with U.S. energy policy? Without the Biden veto, Keystone XL would have added 840,000 barrels per day of Canadian supply to the U.S. later this year. Now the U.S. is importing more than 600,000 barrels per day from Putin and may replace that by lifting sanctions on oil from the Iranian and Venezuelan dictatorships. Where's the logic in this? Tell us what you think in the comments. The Russian-Ukraine war also threatens the food supply and livelihood of Europe, Africa, and Asia. Ukraine is known as the breadbasket of Europe. Russia and Ukraine account for 1/3 of global wheat exports. Ukraine is also a major supplier of corn and sunflower oil. Since the war started, wheat sales at major ports in the Black Sea region have come to a near halt. International wheat prices have soared to a record high of 55%. It is even higher than the price during the global food crisis of 2007 and 2008. The director of the International Grains Council, Arnaud Petit, said, "Countries that depend on cheap wheat exports from Ukraine will face shortages starting in July if the war drags on. As millions of people flee Ukraine, farmers are being forced to abandon their land. Ukrainian farmers say that if they cannot start planting soon, this year's grain production is bound to decrease. This could lead to a 1 to 2-fold increase in wheat prices." Russia, which is another major agricultural power, may also see its grain exports affected by Western sanctions. Some of the poorer food importing countries will be hit the hardest. For example, 90% of Lebanon's wheat imports come from Ukraine, and Ukrainian wheat is also a major source for Somalia, Syria, and Libya. Turkey gets 70% of its wheat imports from Russia. Even before the outbreak of the war, Turkey's annual rate of inflation in February had reached 54.4%, and now food prices will only make it go higher. If Turkey imports wheat from the United States or from Australia, the cost will increase significantly. Experts point out that the rise in food prices may trigger political unrest. The last time wheat prices rose sharply in 2007 and 2008 was mainly due to Australia and Russia and other countries' failed wheat harvests. It triggered protests in nearly 40 countries around the world. Grain prices in 2009 and 2010 also rose sharply, which was triggered by the Arab Spring. In Europe, officials are preparing for possible shortages of products from Ukraine and for higher prices for livestock feed. Meat and dairy products are likely to become more expensive. Ukraine supplies the EU with nearly half of the key components of grain needed for livestock feed. Russia provided 40% of the EU's gas needs, and it's also a major supplier of fertilizer, wheat, and other staple foods. EU agricultural ministers are discussing whether to allow farmers to put 10% of their set-aside farmlands into production. Wheat stocks are quite tight around the world, and mainland China and South Korea are also buying corn in large quantities. Analysis points out that it is not clear how long this crisis will last, which is driving food prices up. And markets fear that the food supply problem is unlikely to be solved in the short term. This war seems to be holding the world hostage. Florida Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo announced on March 7th that the Florida Department of Health will officially recommend not giving COVID-19 vaccinations for healthy children. Ladapo said the Florida Department of Health is going to be the first state department to officially recommend against the COVID-19 vaccines for healthy children. As of February 24th, the FDA has postponed making a decision on the vaccine for children under 5 years old. Ladapo cited a recent study from the New York State Department of Health, which found the vaccine's effectiveness against hospitalizations in children in the 5 to 11 age group had dropped from 100% to 48% over the course of about 6 weeks. The CDC currently recommends that everyone ages 5 and older get the coronavirus vaccine. According to the CDC, just 663 of the over 914,000 deaths, that is 0.07% of the deaths attributed to COVID-19 in America, have been among those who are 18 years or younger. This is why it is so important for all of us to do our own research. As we struggle with everything that's going on in the world, there appears to be a bright spot on the horizon. Florida has led the nation with a low number of COVID cases recently without the restrictive use of lockdowns and mandates. I did the research and found some eye-opening data that I'd like to share with you. I want to show you the trailer. Recently, Florida had a 90% drop in pandemic cases without any lockdowns or mandates. Florida's COVID-19 numbers dropped from the highest in the nation this past summer to currently the lowest. This suggests that the approach being taken in general may be wrong. The fact that the vaccine is only effective for 6 months and people who have been vaccinated continue to be infected, I'm wondering if there may be a better way to prevent COVID-19 than the vaccine. But these options are not getting the attention they deserve because the mainstream medical community doesn't want to talk about it. So I did some research and found some very enlightening data and some impressive examples. Because of the sensitive nature of this topic, we'll be putting this video on our membership site. So please watch the full episode on frontpageshow.com. The Trump administration's punitive tariffs against the CCP are facing a statutory review. But surprisingly, the Biden administration does not appear to be interested in lifting them at this time. The Trump administration's Section 301 tariffs on more than $300 billion of Chinese imports will automatically expire if they are not renewed after 4 years and deemed necessary. Despite the recent spike in inflation, the Biden administration has so far shown little willingness to lift these tariffs because the CCP has not fully met its negotiated requirements to purchase U.S. goods, and so the U.S.-China relations are deteriorating rather than improving. Trump's first Section 301 tariffs were implemented between March and April in 2018, and they will have been in place for 4 years by March 4th of this year. The law requires that the review process be completed within 60 days of their potential end. The Trump administration and the CCP reached a Phase 1 trade agreement in early 2020. The CCP agreed to increase its purchase of U.S. goods in exchange for the gradual withdrawal of U.S. tariffs. However, since the CCP has not complied with the agreement, Bloomberg reported that the Biden administration is leaning toward not withdrawing the tariffs. With the CCP backing Russia in the war against Ukraine, and with CCP's threatening posture towards the Biden administration rising, the Biden administration has little political room to remove the tariffs. There is ugliness in this world, but there are also many beautiful things. A young photographer from Indonesia, Stanley Arianto, witnessed an extremely rare astronomical event when he was lucky enough to capture a beautiful image of Comet Neowise with the Aurora Borealis and the Milky Way dancing together in the sky in the Canadian Rockies. I want to take a moment to thank you all for your support of Front Page. Your donation and your membership subscription help us to keep telling the truth. Every like, comment, and share helps more people to see the truth. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. And if you have already subscribed, please double check to make sure that you are still subscribed. We have heard from many of our viewers that they don't get notifications from YouTube for our videos anymore. So please follow us on Telegram, Gab, and Getter for the latest updates. Okay, this is our show for today. If you like what you heard, please don't forget to like and subscribe this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth. Again, thank you for watching Front Page, and we will see you next time.